have the awesome privilege. Well, good evening, good afternoon, everybody. Now we're live. My name is Jeremiah Carter, and welcome to episode 3 of the Hamburgers, Hot Dog, and Healing. Today, we're talking about the do's and don'ts of an arrest. A little bit about myself. I'm born and raised in Broward County, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, to 33311. And I am so excited that I've been asked by Table Talk Media, the Dorsey River Band Association, and Prince the King's mentoring program to facilitate today's discussion. We have some amazing guests with us. We have the Honorable Judge Elijah Williams and the Honorable Judge Cal Evans. And go ahead right now. I'm going to ask Judge Elijah Williams to go ahead and introduce himself to us and tell us a little bit about yourself.
All righty. Can you hear me, Mr. Carter?
Yes, I can hear you great.
It's kind of funny. When Sharon Hughes asked me to come on, I told her, I'm not a believer in technology. I don't own a personal computer. I don't have an email address that's personal. I don't have an ATM card. I don't have a SunPass. I live off the grid because several years ago, I think it was the Crips broke into my house trying to locate me because I put a lot of people away. And ever since then, I've lived off the grid. So it's a Saturday, so I had my secretary come in, my judicial assistant, to set all this up because I can never get tech to work. And if you ask me what kind of a cell phone I have, I can't even tell you. I just started texting about 2.5 years ago. So thank you very much for having me in your world, Mr. Carter. I will go ahead and I will say, now that I'm set up, I've been a judge for almost 18 years. I'm a product of Broward County, Florida. I was born and raised here. I was born in a government housing project called the Dixie Court Projects. Went to Walker Elementary School, Broward Estates, Parkway Middle School, and then South Plantation High School. So I'm from this community, and I thought back then we had some excellent public schools, and they produced me. After I left there, I went to the University of Florida, where I earned 3 degrees, a bachelor's, a master's, and a law degree. I then served my country as a captain in the Air Force for about 5 years. I got out and became a prosecutor with Mike Satz's office. And I was the sheriff's legal counsel for the Broward Sheriff for 2 sheriffs, Ken Jenny and Ron Cochran. And I've been a judge for 18 years. And I just want to say thank you for having me on your show. It's time we had these type of discussions, Mr. Carter. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you for being here. Judge Evans, go ahead and introduce yourself to us.
I'm Judge Cal Evans, and I'm also a product of the 33311, and born and raised most of my life. I'll say that. I grew up in Tatertown, and most of you know me from that. I also spent some time in the 33312. Also went to the same elementary school as Judge Williams. We just may have had a little bit of a time difference, and when I say a little bit, just a little bit of a time difference in terms of when we attended school. But that's where I started my life, is Walker Elementary. And when I say I started my life there, we lost our house when I was 10, so I was homeless. One of the first places we spent the night was in my mom's classroom. My mom taught at Walker. So losing our house, it was a really difficult thing for me because we depended on everyone in the community. So when I say, and I say this at a lot of public engagements, that I'm the child that the community raised, I say that because the community literally raised me. I was on my godmother's couch. I was on someone else's couch, and I was with my family, so I wasn't alone. We were house to house, couch to couch for a while, about 6 months. But you can only depend on people's kindness for so long. So after a while, we wore our welcome. Then we became truly homeless. And I was removed from Walker Elementary because you can't have a post office box as your permanent address. And, I wound up bouncing around between various cities in the county, and then I wound up in Dade County. And so I attended 4 different elementary schools, including being homeschooled as well. I lived in homeless shelter when I was 11, up until the point where just before I turned 12, and I wound up graduating from high school in Dade County, and I went to the University of Michigan, and I brought my cup just for Judge Williams because we have a friendly little rivalry going on. But I went to the University of Michigan for undergrad, and I came back home. And one of the things about me is when I came home, I did something that I wish had been done for me. Some of the people that influenced me when I was really young, when they left, they didn't come back. And I had this discussion with at my godmother's funeral. At my godmother's funeral, they wanted her oldest sons wanted to know why so many of my young friends, and they called us the kids of the group, why so many of us wound up in prison, or dead. Actually, more wound up dead than in prison, but of the ones in prison, they're also referring to their younger brother who's my age. He wasn't able to be there. He wasn't able to be there at his mother's wake. So I was there and I sat with the family at his mother's wake. They just could not understand how I made it to the bench. And I talked about doing this when I was 9. But their brother was in prison and couldn't be there. And it was mind blowing to them. But I said, you left and you never came back. You were our positive influences, our positive role models. So I didn't have a whole lot of that growing up. What I did is every time I had a positive influence, those are the people that I looked to and I looked up to and I clung on to. And I don't want someone to get a big head, but when I became a lawyer, I also worked as a prosecutor as well. The same office as Judge Williams did, but I had the privilege of trying cases in front of the people that I looked up to as a child, the people I looked up to as a young attorney. And, you know, Judge Williams, Judge Holmes, Judge Mary Robinson, when I was an intern, I tried, she didn't remember it. She's retired. And I told her, I said, it may be a footnote in your career and that's okay. But for me, it meant a lot because, you know, when I spoke to Judge Williams and I found out that he went to Walker Elementary, I said, you know what? For all those people who told me I couldn't do this, I have someone who's proof that I can do it. And he has meant so much to me over my career. He's been the example of what I aspire to be. And to be on a podcast with him is amazing because I always tell him that I'm usually, you know, I just want to be his opening act. And, you know, I'll be, you know, or an audience member wherever he's speaking. And because he's somebody that has been instrumental in my career. And I had this foolish notion because I always felt that, you know, being a Black man in Broward County, I felt like I was held to a different standard. And I had this number in my head of how many years I had to practice before I started putting in. And I asked Judge Williams to perform my wedding ceremony. And before he agreed to perform my wedding ceremony, first he wanted to meet my wife. So we sat down at the Macaroni Grill. That was his spot back then. And after he looked at my wife and he looked at me, he told my wife, he said, well, I know why he wants to marry you. Why do you want to marry him? And this is somebody I look up to as my role model, talking my wife out of trying to marry me. But, you know, he wanted to gauge her reaction. That was for my protection. And I get why he did it. But afterwards, we had a serious conversation about where I was going in life. And I told him, honestly, I want to do what you do. And he told me I was foolish to keep delaying this for some arbitrary number. So he pushed me and he refused to do my wedding unless I accepted the challenge. And that's what I did. He held me to it and I kept my word. Now I got a lot of no's before I finally got a yes, but I kept trying.
That's awesome.
So he pushed me and he continues to push me because he gives me that, the model to look up to what I aspire to be.
That's awesome. That's very, very awesome. Very awesome. I mean, Judge Elijah Williams is an amazing person. Now, You two did something. You both shouted out your university, the University of Florida, University of Michigan. But I cannot let this go by. I need to give a shout out to my university. I am a graduate of the Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University, Florida A&M. FAMU, the Rattlers. And I know it's a lot of Rattlers watching this, and they'll be upset if I don't give a shout out to the number one of the top HBCUs in this nation. So,
You know how many folks in my family went to that school? My dad went to that school.
yes.
I have a niece and a great niece there right now.
Hey, that's one of the best schools they can go to.
And my baby sister went there as well.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. That's awesome. So let's hop right into this discussion. So we're talking about the do's and don'ts of an arrest. And one thing I've noticed is that a lot of people that look like me get arrested and they don't know their rights as a black person. They don't know their rights when they get arrested. They don't know what to do. They're not educated on their rights. So my first question is, how can we as African Americans educate ourselves on our rights? What are the necessary steps we need to take? Because I believe that we as African Americans, we as people in general, need to be proactive instead of reactive. We need to be proactive. We need to know our rights before something happened. Don't wait till it happened, then you got to figure out, well, what are my rights? So how can we as African Americans be proactive with knowing our rights? Who wants to take a stab at it? Judge Williams, you can go ahead and answer that first. Oh wait, he's muted. Wait a minute.
Am I unmuted
Yes.
now?
No. Wait 1 second. Wait a second. You're still muted.
I'm going to unmute again. Am I off for now?
Yes, you're good. All right, go ahead.
Okay. I think, Mr. Carter, I'm going to give you a different twist. I am a judge. The minute that a cop's telling me my rights, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney and so forth. I'm being given my rights, but that also means I'm being arrested. Now, I'm a judge. If I get arrested, I'm in the front pages of the paper. My reputation is ruined. I'll likely be suspended from the bench. Everything I've worked for over 30 years is going down the drain. Now, I've got my rights, but guess what? It's going to cost me everything. So what I tell people is the object of the game is for you not to get arrested when you have done something wrong. That's the object of the game. I believe in what I call talking yourself out of an arrest. Let me give you an example of what I mean. I've been driving a car for 46 years. I have never been given a ticket in my entire life. I've got a clean driving record. Since I was 15, I haven't always been a judge or a lawyer, but I never got traffic tickets because I learned at a very early age that when a police officer approaches you, he's only asking one question. Are you a friend or are you a foe? Are you a friend or are you my enemy? That's all he wants to know. Now, what I've been doing for years, and I shouldn't tell you this, Mr. Carter, is I play with my radio station. So if I'm in a country area like Alabama, Mississippi, or Georgia, I put on country music and I let the window down. So when the officer walks up there, he says, whoa, he must be a friend of mine. We listen to the same music because friends listen to the same music. Think about it for a second. You walk into any small child or teenagers, they all listen to the same music. Or if I'm in like a city area, I switch it on to classical because the officer walking up to the car will think, wow, classical music. This guy must be educated. He must be sophisticated. He must be a man of high class and stature. You understand how it works? So by the time he walks up to my window, the officer thinks this man is a friend simply by the music I have playing on my radio. That's how quick these snap judgments are made. Remember, in a police officer's perspective, he could walk up to a car with a light out, a brake light, and that guy can pull a gun and kill him. There have been so many instances. So everyone is dangerous to a police officer. He's only asking the question, is this person a friend or an enemy? Once he's convinced that you're his friend, guess what? He's likely not going to give you that ticket or arrest you because you're his friend. And I've done this for so many years, and when I lecture cops and stuff, they all start laughing. And they say, Judge, you call it right on the money. The music is very critical. We're making a decision about you just based upon the music coming out of your car. Okay. Another thing is, I never lie to cops. And the reason why is cops, I ask you a question simply to watch you tell a lie. They already know the answer to the question. They just want to hear you tell a lie. So when they ask you, hey, were you speeding? And you say no, the man already knows you were going 65 or 70 miles an hour. So what I always do with the police officer, I always say, listen, you're here to conduct an investigation. Let me go ahead and tell you, I was going above the speed limit. How fast is the key? Right away, the police officer will look and say, wow, he's already solved my investigation problem. The man is conceding that he was going above the speed limit. So I just have a different reaction than a lot of other people about how to deal with police officers. For example, Mr. Carter, on occasion, I will stop by after work and I will have myself a drink of wine. Now, I don't drive while drunk, but certainly there's nothing illegal about drinking while driving. That's why we have parking lots outside of bars. A man can actually drink and get in the car and drive. You can't be over the limit. You can't be drunk and driving. But I always keep a receipt for that one drink. So if a police officer pulls me over, he's going to want to know how many drinks have I had. I then take the receipt out and I say, here it is, sir. I just left this establishment. I had a glass of wine. At that point, you've solved that police officer's problem. We need to have you step out the car, walk the line, and conduct an investigation. You've already done his job for him. You've already proved you've only had one drink. So what I do is I tell people to use these techniques and over the country, and they come back and they say, wow, Judge, you're right on the money. So again, I look at police officers as someone who's trying to determine, am I their friend or am I their enemy? And I think by the time you start saying, yes, sir, officer, no, sir, officer, I think that they've already made their decision before you're trying to be courteous. They make that decision when they're walking up to the car to gauge, are you their friend or are you their foe?
Great answer. Great answer. Judge Evans, you want to tag in on that?
Yes, but it's personal because I've had that conversation not in these type of forums, but in my family. My father had that conversation with me. I've had that conversation with my nephews. At some point in time, I'll have that conversation with my daughter. She's a little young for that right now, but I'll give you an example. When Judge Williams was talking about a judgment is being made about you before you say a word, a judgment is being made about you. How you carry yourself, how you conduct yourself. Someone's looking, someone's watching, and someone's certainly saying something. One of my nephews wanted to apply to BSO for corrections. Now, he asked me if he could put me down as a reference. This is my nephew. I said, and he's the one who asked me if I was going to shave my beard before I did this today. But I told him I wasn't going to shave my beard. But when he applied for BSO to be corrections, and this was years ago, I told him, you can put me down as a reference as soon as you take those gold teeth out of your mouth. Because my brother paid a lot of money to get his teeth fixed, and he went right back and put another set in. And he wondered why he couldn't get a job. Everywhere he applied, he kept getting turned down. And he had tops and bottom. So he had a 4A pack. And I'm not sure if everyone knows what 8-pack means, but the top and the bottom fully covered. So we had that conversation. I talked to my other nephews as well. I talked to kids in the community about how you carry yourself, how you conduct yourself, how you walk and talk. Those assumptions about are you a friend or are you a foe are being made, and you don't want to be assumed to be a foe, especially if the topic we're discussing is law enforcement. We all fear the gun. Judge Williams told me long ago the most powerful weapon is not a firearm. The most powerful weapon is a pen.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And he's spoken at so many events, and I've heard that. And he doesn't know that I take notes and I listen as he talks. But when I say he's influenced me, I've listened to these things over the years, and they've always made me think. But I don't just take them and internalize them to use them at work. I use them to speak to my family. So it's something that, you know, I talked to one of my nephews about his car, and I said, I get that you want to have your tents the way you have your tents, but you understand that your tents are illegal. And he said, well, I like my tents. I said, I understand that, but that's a big sign. You already acknowledging it's illegal, and you're saying, stop me. That's what you're telling the world. Please stop me, because I know my tents are illegal, but that's just a reason for a stop. And for me, one of the things that I made a conscious decision on, when I came back to Michigan, I went to law school at Nova, and that's when I came back to Broward County. I cut my hair off. And people always ask me, you know, am I naturally bald? No, I just shaved before I got here. And I use the straight blade. That's how you can see the lines on my beard are nice and tight. But
yeah. Not the
I wanted to make sure that how I carried myself and how I conducted myself, how I dress, how I walk. My wife thinks it's absurd that I put a suit on when I go, if I needed to go shopping I mean, obviously not right now, but if I need to go shopping in a store, because I've been followed, I've been, you know, I've experienced all that. So how I carry myself and how I conduct myself, I realize that it has implications.
Excellent. That's an excellent point. Excellent point. I believe we have a young man on here who has a question. Please introduce yourself and go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, my name is Davion Thomas. One day, me and some of my friends were walking in the neighborhood. We were stopped for no reason. They had us sitting on the side of the road with handcuffs, searching us and running our names. They never told us why we were stopped. After 30 minutes later, they released us saying that we fit the description of a gang. Everyone was under the age of 16. It was embarrassing. Could we have refused to search?
Well, what I would say is, Mr. Thomas, I can't find anywhere a law that says that the police have to tell you when they're arresting you while they're taking you in. I have looked for that law, and I can't see it in any type of Citizens Bill of Rights. I do know, like in the Terrorism Act, they can take you and hold you for weeks or months without even telling you why they're holding you for weeks or months at the federal level. But again, I think an officer can just put you in the car without telling you why. And when you get down to the station, I think then they will tell you you're now being charged with such and such. And so again, I think that's one of those issues in which I've never been able to quite find a law says that before he puts you in that car, he must tell you you are now being arrested for. I think he must tell you at the station and allow you to make your call. What I would say, Mr. Thomas, is this: you did nothing wrong. They were suspecting you of gang activity. All right. Now, listen to me very carefully. I come to you as a judge, okay? You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
back in Texas, there was a guy, a warden, who saw the execution of over 100 prisoners. And he retired. I was watching an interview, and they asked him, they said, you watched 100 men get executed. Like, what's the number one reason that people get executed? And the warden say, being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Being in the wrong place at the wrong time. You were doing nothing wrong, but you were in a place where the police officer says, we think that these bunch of guys are gang members. You're not a gang member, but you're in a place that allowed someone to say that. So what I would say to you is, if you think you've been wrong, you can certainly file an internal affairs report with the police department. But what I would say to you is to be very careful about the places that you are so that you're not in the wrong place at the wrong time. You understand what I'm saying? It's like this, Mr. Carter. We think that the police department, a police officer's strongest weapon is the badge, the lights, the gun. That's not his weapons. His weapons is the pen. If he writes your name in a report, that report can stay with you the rest of your entire life. And it can prevent you, right. And it can prevent you from going to certain colleges. It can prevent you from ever being a lawyer because the Florida bar arrest. It can prevent you from going into the military. You can go, but you can't get a top security clearance. That's if you get in. It can prevent you from working with the school board and so forth. So what I tell people is, yes, the police officer is wrong. Yes, you should file an internal affairs police report, but bear in mind, that police officer is going to be retiring in a cabin in South Carolina or North Carolina with a great pension. And you're going to find yourself without the ability to get the necessary opportunities and jobs that you deserve. So I always tell people, I don't focus so much on the cop. I focus so much on where am I going to be in 10, 20, and 30 years. So again, focus on you, not him. Because I can tell you, I worked at the Broward Sheriff's Office. Those officers got a plan to retire and get their pension. Okay, and they will get that nice cabin on the lake up in North Carolina where they can fish all day. Okay, and then we're sitting back with the results of what they've done, and we can't get jobs and so forth. So it's very unfair, but focus on you and where you're headed, not so much on them and where they're headed.
I agree with you on that. It's very important that one thing I always tell young people who are younger than me, be careful, just be careful of your surroundings, be careful of the company that you keep, make sure you are, if your mama told you, let you go to the mall, you need to be at the mall. Don't be down the street somewhere else, because if something happened, mama think you at the mall. But mama get a phone call. No, he down the street. So if you're gonna be somewhere, make sure you're there. We did have a question. I want to get to this person's question. It was about criminal points. It says my question. I have 2 sons. Are you guys allowed to discuss or explain the criminal points and how they work?
Yeah, I think that the question is involved the juvenile delinquency system.
Yes.
And that's where you get the points. It's what I do every day. Essentially, a juvenile earns points. For example, if you break into a house, a car, or if you shoplift, or if you get in a school fight and so forth, you begin to earn points. Once you get to about, let's say, 12 or 13 points, if you get arrested past that point, you're going to be held 21 days based upon your past history. Or if you have like 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 points, you go home. Now, and it's all based upon the charge, but also your history. So what I would say to you is, if you steal 1 car or 1 bicycle, you're likely going to be going home that night. But if your points reach a certain level of 12 or 13, you're going to be wearing a box in your leg, electronic monitoring device, and/or you will be spending 21 days. Now, the 21 days is just for the state to file the charges. After that, in the juvenile system, you could actually serve up to 3 years. A juvenile in the state of Florida under the age of 18 who commits that crime under the age of 18 can be sentenced for up to 3 years, or if he gets 2 years and commits another crime, 2 years. he could be sentenced until he's 21.
Mm.
So a juvenile could actually go from the age of 14 to the age of 21 if he continues to get in trouble.
Oh wow. Now, Judge Evans, you can go ahead and answer this next question. It says, it's very interesting question. It says, why do some Black youth get arrested in their community just for walking and or minding their business? Now, I wonder if that has to do with racial profiling. But it's a great question. It's a great question, though.
Well, that ties into the previous question Judge Williams answered, not the one just before, but the one that preceded it, about knowing your rights. What happens when you're stopped, because I've been stopped, not once, not twice. I don't know how many times that I've been stopped. But this notion that when you're stopped, that they have to tell you exactly why they're stopping you and why, or being detained. I figured out where it came from. It came from me growing up in a small pond versus the ocean, or me seeing things on TV. And on TV, every time a police officer gets out of the car, the first thing they do is reading you your rights.
Mm-hmm.
Those are your Miranda rights. They
Yes.
apply only after you've been arrested and they're asking you questions that could implicate you in whatever charge that they're investigating. So they have to tell you that you have the right to an attorney. That is only after you're arrested. There's no backtrack after that. At that point, they decided to arrest you. You're going to jail. So we assume improperly sometimes that those rights apply to us before they've made that decision. Now, they don't. And I learned that the hard way before I was ever a lawyer, before I was ever a legal intern. And I did my first legal internship in high school. But the battle is about what happens in court, not about what happens at that scene. Sometimes we focus too much on what happens at the scene because of everything, and I'm not ignorant as to what's going on today. Judge Williams and we have to be careful about what we say, because anything we say, if it's perceived that we prejudge any case that could possibly come before us, then on any side, that we could be removed from that case or removed from the criminal division. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but there is currently one Black judge in the criminal division for delinquency for juveniles,
Yep.
and one Black judge in the criminal division for adults. And you're looking at both of them right now.
Yes.
So,
but let me throw this out here real quick. And I'm gonna let you continue. Tell everyone how many Black judges Broward County have.
Right now we have 12. That wasn't the number
12.
we got here.
Yeah.
When I arrived, I was in number 6.
Yeah, I remember that.
And it was big for us back then. It was something to be celebrated back then, and but then it became one of those things where I was told, Judge Evans, be careful what you say and what you do, because there won't be another one to come. So I've conducted myself in a way that is above and beyond. And when we were first coming on, I was in a suit, even though I'm at home. I saw Judge Williams wear his robe, so I put my robe on. But I'm representing not just the legal community, not just being a judge, but I'm representing the community that I grew up from. So I wanted to represent proudly as someone who came up in the 33311, but I also wanted to represent the legal community as well. So I conduct myself in a way that is a little bit different than others. And sometimes at those conferences, they say, nobody else wears a suit every day. Why does this man wear a suit every day? I wear a suit every day.
Represent yourself.
Exactly. Because I'm not just representing me when I'm up there. I'm representing you, and I'm representing everyone that comes from the 33311, from anyone who looks like you, like me, like Judge Williams. This is what I do every day is much bigger than me, and I'm keenly aware of that.
And that's important. That is very, like I said in my previous point, it is very important. Young people, even people my age. I just turned 27. I just celebrated a birthday on August 13th. So, and like I tell people, when you leave your house, know who you're representing. Know who, know who you're representing. And that's my motivation when I get up and I leave home and I go to work, going to school, going to grad school. I'm always reminded that people always ask me, well, why do you do what you do? I say, because look where I'm from. I say, it's a lot of people my age. I didn't make it to this age. It's a lot of people my age that can't do what I'm doing right now. It's because they're not here or they're behind bars. I decided to take a different route. And I'm gonna just throw it out there. I remember before I went to middle school, I was a roughneck. Everybody will tell you this. I was a roughneck. But I left home in 6th grade, moved to Georgia to stay with my aunt. My aunt didn't beat me. She didn't do none of that stuff. My aunt is a preacher.
Okay, I can't imagine a house that nobody was beaten. I'm sorry.
Yeah. But no, I'm just saying she didn't have to do none of that. She didn't have to do none of that when I was up there. I was a roughneck, but when I got up there, she was a preacher, and it was the country. I was in Bartow, Georgia, in the country. But I remembered everyone, as soon as I told people, they was like, well, who is your aunt? And I told them my aunt's name. They was like, oh, so you got to behave yourself. So that from that day forward, I made sure I was on my best behavior. And then when I got back, everyone just noticed, you're different. So I said, and that's what I told them. They said, you're different. I say, yeah. I said, she ain't beat me. She ain't do nothing. It's just, I said, just try living with a preacher for a good 9 months. You'll change. So I can concur with that when you say you gotta know who you're representing when you're leaving the house. Now we touched on this last segment. We mentioned it over and over and again. Go ahead and explain to me the Miranda law, because a lot of people, they just hear the statement, you have a right to remain silent and continue. But go ahead and explain to me, both of you, the Miranda law and why that is important.
Judge Evans, I'll let you go ahead on that one.
The Miranda rights are, and they stem just from a case called involving a gentleman with the last name Miranda. So these are the rights that you have when you are detained for a crime and they want to question you. So the rights have evolved over the years, but we are so particular at this point in time that they have to be read to you and read to you properly. I have seen cases overturned and that's why I say the battle is not necessarily as much as everyone focuses on what happens on the scene of an incident. It happens in court, because I've seen confessions thrown out because things were asked improperly. I remember back when I was a prosecutor, there was a confession on a very serious sexual battery case with a very young child. But one of the questions, as someone was being read his rights, that you have a right to ask questions at that point in time. If you don't understand something, you have the right to have them clarify something, because sometimes words are used that we didn't grow up using. We don't understand those terms. Judge Williams and I went to school to have those terms explained to us, and we studied those things at length. But growing up, you have, like, what I had was Perry Mason on TV or commercials for attorneys. That's what we had growing up. We didn't have a lot of representation that we saw as children to explain what our rights were. So that's why this forum is amazing, and that the work you've been doing, because I checked out what you've been up to. It's tremendous, because it educates so many people at the same time. Because the gentleman, like that young man who came in, when he first popped on the screen, I thought, I had to take a second look, and I thought that was one of my great nephews, because he looks exactly like my great nephew, And until he stepped into the light a little bit, I could see his facial features were different. So I said, okay, that's not my. I thought he was going to call me Uncle Cal. So, but it's all about, and if these things are not done properly, a judge must throw certain things out, or certain things must be excluded. So that's what it's more about, your protections that you're afforded once they've made that determination, and now they want to use your statements against you. When they say you have the right to remain silent, at that point they've already determined that, or they believe they have enough cause to determine that you've committed a crime. So at that point, we're past being your friend or your foe. We believe that you've committed a crime. So at that point, they've made that determination. So you're like, I'll give you an example. The first thing is, I've been conducting my hearings on Zoom since March. The first thing I tell people is, when they pop into a Zoom room, is that you're being recorded. Don't say anything right now that you don't want to be played at your trial. Anything you say right now is public. Yeah, so anyone can order it at any point in time. So please understand that. And while we're talking about technology, if you enter a Zoom hearing as a witness, as an observer, or as a defendant, or even as an attorney, dress appropriately for court. Because I've had people who I will not name that I've advised, make sure that you understand that you're in a courtroom. This is a courtroom, and they come in and they don't realize. And some of the attorneys have said, "Judge, you didn't say anything about how she was." I said, "It's not my business," and I keep moving. But that's your representation. That's what you're putting out for the world to see.
Yeah, so, I agree.
So you're right. To remain silent is probably one of the biggest ones, because people don't realize that all you're doing is providing, at that point, evidence that can be used against you. If you truly haven't done anything that can be addressed in court, or you have the opportunity to, if you feel that you have, like Judge Williams had, that receipt, well, that's crucial right there, because if they're suspecting DUI, you've already disproven the case at that juncture. So it's your choice, but understand these are your rights. So you have the rights, and you can waive those rights if you choose.
Okay. We have another question from a viewer. It says, it's a great question, and it goes back into, be careful of the company that you keep. A 13-year-old girl wants to know why, if you're in a fight with friends and if one person gets in trouble, let me read this. She wants to know why, if you're with your friends and one gets into a fight, everyone gets in trouble, even if I didn't throw a punch. So let me change it up here now that I got the question. So say I'm with a group of people, I'm with a group of my friends, one get into a fight. Now, Johnny threw the punch. I didn't throw the punch, but when the police came out there, they took everybody. So why is that? Is it because of I was at the scene, or I probably was planning this whole fight? Why is that?
Well, I can tell you that there is a theory in the law. What is it, Judge Evans?
The principal theory, 777.011.
What's it called, Judge Evans?
It's the principal theory. Florida statute 777.011.
What's it called?
The principal theory. That basically says if you take any role in the and you push the furtherance of that crime, if you contribute to the furtherance of that crime, if you say, yeah, hit him, well,
right,
you just threw yourself in the mix.
Exactly. It goes back. Thank you, Judge Evans. It goes back to what I've been saying earlier. You need to be responsible. You're not in the wrong place at the wrong time. If there is a fight and you are there, you may not be the person throwing the punch. All right. But you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, because the cops can arrest anybody who supports that fight, assists that fight, encourages that fight, as Judge Evans says. If you say, go ahead, hit him or whatever, okay, everybody can be arrested based upon the principal theory. All right. It's what allows the cops, if there's a robbery and there's 3 guys in the car, one's the getaway man, he drives the car, the other one's the robber, the other one sits in the back seat, all 3 go down for the robbery, not the person who go inside. Okay. So again, the stuff that we're doing is real simple stuff. Remember, guys, America's been around 244 years. And I'm going to say something that I can't prove, but no one has ever won an argument with a police officer at 1 o'clock in the morning in an alleyway. So no one in 244 years of this country's existence has ever won an argument with a police officer at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning in an alleyway. I don't think it's ever happened. I think, Jeremiah, what we have to understand as Black people is something which I can't get around. Our whole legal system, the criminal justice system, was designed by people who are white, who are wealthy, and who are highly educated. The system works for people who are white, who are wealthy, who are highly educated. That's why you don't see them complain too much about the criminal justice or the legal system.
Nope.
The challenge I have every day when I walk into my courtroom is how do I make that same system work for a person of color, a person who is poor, or a person who's not as educated? That's what this challenge is all about for all of us, particularly a Black judge. But one of the things that concerns me, I think more than anything else, as I deal with this area, is back in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, we began to wonder, like, why are Black people treated differently, mass incarceration? And all the books and literature told us that it was because we had racist cops, racist prosecutors, and racist judges. Nowadays, I don't see any books on racist cops, racist police officers, judges, and prosecutors. We don't even talk about that anymore. It's as if they all disappeared. What we talk about is something called subconscious bias, unconscious bias, where people are walking around not even knowing that they are racist or that they're biased. What happened to George Floyd? I don't think that was unconscious bias. I think that was racism, if what I believe to be true is indeed found to be true. What happened with Hamburger in Georgia? Is that unconscious or subliminal bias, or is that outright racism? I think at some point in time, we as Black folks are going to have to go back to discussing racism and not try and give it fancy terms like selective bias, unconscious bias, subliminal bias, which means nothing because the person who has this doesn't even realize that they're even like biased or prejudiced. So again, folks, we need to get back to understanding what we're talking about. One of the things I will say, Mr. Carter, is that we confuse bias and prejudice too much. From a legal term, the word bias means in favor of.
Yes.
The word prejudice means against. So the question becomes, are whites biased, white cops biased in favor of white, or are they prejudiced against Blacks? And I think we spend too much time dealing with bias issues. Whether someone is biased in front of his own race, I can't change that. My concern is, are they prejudiced against the Black race? So I think when we mix these terms of bias and prejudice, we're getting the whole discussion confused.
Yeah. That great. That's an excellent point. And just one more time for everyone who probably missed it, where can they find the principal theory? They can find it where, Judge Evans?
Florida statute 777.011.
Okay. I'm going to send that to a couple of folk.
When I learned it, I did not forget it. That's why it's ingrained in my brain.
I'm going to send it to a couple of folk that be fighting, and they like to post and fights and stuff. I'm gonna say, y'all know about the principal theory?
But it works in different ways, though, because you're focused on the law enforcement aspect. As a child, just being around who I was around, because those are the people who I lived with at the time, or those are the only people I knew at the time. When you're a child, you don't have very many options because you better be home. Well, at least in my era, you had to be home when the streetlights came on. And I cringe when I see a belt. I'm scared to put a belt on. And if I had to pick my own switch, I knew I was in trouble.
You gotta pick the lightest switch now.
No, because if it breaks, then you get another one. So don't weekend bamboozle anybody. But for me, I knew that. I learned early that sometimes people you're around can get you into trouble, not just with law enforcement, because I've been pulled over because they mistook me for one of my friends because we looked a lot in our appearance and the way we carried ourselves. But then I had an unfortunate incident when I was 12, and I was being babysat by someone who, and I hate to say babysat when I was 12, but I was being watched by someone who, while my mother worked, because she had to work very hard to make sure that we had something to go to, some place to go to. But I was actually shot when I was 12, and it's not something that's a badge of honor. I'm not a rapper so I don't go platinum because I was shot. Nobody reelects me because I was shot. But it was that wrong place, wrong time can apply in so many different ways. And I buried, I don't know how many people that I'm not saying I'm desensitized to it, because I remember every single time that it's ever happened. But being around someone, I've had a gun pointed in my face more than once, and not by law enforcement, by people who look like us, who dress like us, who talk like us. And I lost a friend. I remember speaking, and I was swearing in the bar. We're both judicial liaisons for the TJ Reddick Bar Association. And 2 years ago, I was swearing in the board members, and it was right after Nipsey Hussle died, and they were quoting his lyrics. And I said, I appreciate what he stood for as a businessman in terms of owning the masses of your music and working the hard way to get somewhere instead of trying to sign a flashy deal for a lot of money. And he took a long time to get recognized. They call him a legend in the game because he was maybe 12 albums in before anyone nationally knew his name. But the lyrics, if you listen to the content of some of his music, he spoke death into existence.
He spoke good stuff,
But he spoke about. He has a song with Drake called "Killer," which he actually talks about his own death. But that song was made when Drake was brand new, when no one knew who Drake was. All Drake did was sing hooks. So he spoke his death into existence, and they were quoting him on the day that I literally just came back from the cemetery, from visiting the gravesite of one of my friends that I buried when I was a teenager. And I said, ladies and gentlemen, would you please mind, if you want to use his message, use the positivity in his message.
Yes,
not the negativity. Because no man or woman has ever been perfect. There's been one perfect person to walk the face of the earth. And, we all have our flaws. But if you're going to highlight someone's life, highlight the positive
highlight the positive side. Just a quick commercial break. Not a commercial break, but a shout out once again. If you're just tuning in, this is the Hotdogs, Hamburger, and Healing. This is episode 3. We're talking about Know Your Rights with the Honorable Judge Elijah Williams and the Honorable Judge Kyle Evans. Just to thank you to our sponsors, Table Talk Media, the Dorsey River Band Association, and Prince the King's mentoring program. All three great organizations doing great things here in Broward County, Florida. Now, somebody posted a question about the transition between a young man and an adult when it comes to the court system. Now, Judge Williams, I've actually observed you as a judge. I wasn't a criminal, but I came in there on a field trip. I've been to your courtroom. I've been to your courtroom plenty of times to watch you.
You don't need to explain it.
So, but explain the transition between a young man or young woman in the juvenile system, and then what happens if, you know, once they turn 18, they have to transition over to the, I guess, the criminal side. I guess Judge Williams, you can talk about the transition from juvenile, and then Judge Evans, you can talk about what happens when you come over to the criminal side. Because I know once you turn 18, you know, mom and daddy can't rescue you no more. Or if you're like most people, unfortunately, are raised in a single parent household and their mom is working, so mama can't rescue you anymore once you turn 18.
I'm going to go ahead, and I'm making it very simplistic, Mr. Carter, and you're going to be able to find some exceptions. But basically, if you commit an offense or are charged with committing an offense before you're 18 years of age, you will stay in the juvenile system, which means you can face up to 3 years of confinement, or if you up to 21 years of age. So let's say if you're 16 and you commit an offense, and I give you 3 years, you could be there till you're 19. If you mess up with the stroke of a pen, I can lock you up until you're 21. So anybody who commits an offense or is charged with it before they're 18 is going to be in the juvenile system. However, there is this one exception called a direct foul. What that means is if your crime is so serious, or you've committed so many different crimes that are serious, you can be charged as an adult, even when you're only 14, 15, or 16 years of age. If you guys recall the Lionel Tate case, it was a famous case in Broward County involving, I believe, a 13-year-old boy. So you can be charged as an adult under the age of 18 if you commit a very serious offense or your record is so bad. But anytime you commit an offense at the age of 18 or over, you're in the adult system. Nothing to do with juvenile. You're with Judge Cal Evans and that whole crew. So that's what I would say would be the transition. Now, bear in mind now, guys, you do score like a lot of points, as I understand it, in the adult system. The points that you have picked up in the juvenile system can be used against you in the adult system.
Oh, wow.
So, for example, yeah, I had a guy just recently. He was only like 22 years of age, committed a pretty serious offense, and they began to score all of those juvenile offenses on his record. So even with a plea deal, he was looking at having to serve at least 15 years in prison, mostly based upon the juvenile points that he had earned. So when you get to be an adult, they can consider all those juvenile crimes you've considered on your score sheet. In some instances, the next thing you know, a guy who's like 21 or 22 says, wow, I've got to serve at least 15 minimum. You know, so again, be very careful with those juvenile offenses. And something else I need to also go ahead and say.
Go ahead.
To you people, listen to me very, very carefully. Most of you guys are never going to do a robbery. You're not going to kill anybody. 99% of us are good people, and y'all are good people. But we have to look at what hurts us in the future. For example, shoplifting. If you get caught shoplifting, that can affect you. That gets on your record for the rest of your life, because it allows people to say that you are a dishonest, immoral person. The Florida bar will not let you be a lawyer. Trust me, it'll make it very difficult for you to be a lawyer if you have a shoplifting on your record, because that says you can't be trusted. Okay, so are we gonna let you be a lawyer and handle someone's money? Watch out for marijuana smoking. Marijuana is considered a mind-altering substance. It's never changed. The FBI will tell you they will not even hire you for agent jobs if you use certain mind-altering substance, even those that are legal. Be very careful with marijuana. Be very careful with traffic tickets. When I was in the Air Force, we had a lot of young blacks who wanted to be pilots. They had nice degrees from MIT, engineering degrees from Georgia Tech. But all of a sudden, they would find out that they had a careless driving ticket or a reckless driving ticket. And they would say something like this: we're not going to let you fly a $40 million plane with a nuclear warhead if you can't even follow a traffic sign. And so that young brother or sister could not even be a pilot because of a traffic ticket for careless driving and reckless driving that they got when they was a teenager. Same thing when I worked at BSO. One of our colonels, before Sheriff Israel got there, one of our colonels took the position. If you've ever had a traffic ticket for speeding, reckless, careless driving, he said, I'm not going to let you be a cop. He said, because I'm not going to be able to trust you with a gun, a badge, and a car. You can't even follow a stop sign. So I saw people get locked out of opportunities, not because they raped or robbed or shot or murdered somebody or broken a house, but because they had smoked marijuana, because they had shoplifted, because they had, traffic tickets. So be very careful with that little stuff. Remember, shoplifting is what's called a morals offense. That means dishonesty. You would do better to have a fight on your record than something that's shown that you are dishonest. Now, when you get in the military, they're going to say, we'll let you get in. We'll give you a gun. You can get shot. You can get killed. But we're not going to let you have a top security clearance.
And things like that, the small stuff, those things can't be. I just want to know, can those things, for the young people that are listening, so if you have a petty theft, because you actually answered one of the questions I had written down. If you get a petty theft and you're 15 or 16, that can stay on, and you're 30 years old and you're trying to get a job, that can basically affect you down the long run if it's still on your record, correct?
That's correct. And they tried to change the law a couple of years ago saying that stuff would be wiped clean when you turn like 18 or 21 or whatever. But what we're finding out, for example, one of our judges here in the courthouse, secretary, had a misdemeanor battery at the age of 15 against her own brother. She got the record sealed and she thought expunged. Here she is, like in her late 20s, working for a prominent corporation as a regional manager. I want to say Walmart, but I could be wrong. They found out about that little misdemeanor thing. She got sealed and expunged, and they fired her. And when she came to me, we called a company of lawyers, and they say, listen, it might supposed to be expunged or sealed, but bear in mind, we are a major corporation. Anything we want to find out about you as a juvenile, we can find out. And so they said, we're not going to have anybody on our record, on our payroll, who's ever been committed or accused of an offense. So that's why I tell people, we have these things called computers, Jeremiah. And you ever heard the old saying that what goes into cyberspace stays in cyberspace?
Yeah.
Right. So what happens?
Be careful what you post. Yep.
Right. And so what happens is people will all the time come to me. They say, Judge, I built this chemical bomb. I had a white family come to see me with a 13-year-old boy. He's going to put together, I guess, in a Coke bottle, some bleach, some Coke, and you shake it up or something and it explodes the bottle. Nobody got hurt. It's called a chemical bomb. Kids make it. He went through the diversion program, got his record sealed and expunged. He tried to get into the military. He's now like 18 or 19, buffed himself up, wants to be a special forces guy. The military wouldn't take him because the charge was called making a bomb. Making a chemical bomb is in the same statute as making a bomb as a terrorist. It's all called making a bomb. It doesn't make a distinction between a kid who's a teenager and a terrorist. So right away, again, a young man, 13, I think he was 12, actually, I had the records, 12 years old, made a bomb, went through diversion, got it sealed from his record, and he can't be going in the military 9 years later. So guys, be careful with this little stuff.
Yeah. Great. That's, this is an awesome, awesome discussion. Go ahead, Judge Evans. You can chime in. I'll let you chime in.
And I just wanted to piggyback on that because Judge Williams and I, when I appeared before him, when I was a young prosecutor, I was one of the people who pushed, and I was also the person who fielded phone calls for diversion. So there are exceptions when you seal or expunge certain things. So if you work for the military, they're always going to be able to see it, even if you seal it or expungement. or expunge it. If you work for law enforcement, if you want to be a teacher, anything like that. So certain jobs at the Florida bar. So if you want to be a lawyer, there's certain places that are always going to be able to see it. But there's something that people were doing, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And when it dawned on me, I started telling everyone before they enrolled in diversion. And I started telling judges, and I even told defense attorneys when I was a prosecutor, I said, look, it's only because I was a little bit different than the people who I worked with. And so I lived around, I still, even as a prosecutor, I lived around people that I, was prosecuting. I lived in the same apartment complex. I wave, they wave, and, that was it. But I said, wait a minute, you were just in the courtroom the other day, and now you went to one apartment, and you're now in a different apartment in the same complex. And they said, yes. I said, but your child is there too. And they said, yeah, well, yes. And I said, well, did you fill out another background check? And they said, well, yeah, why? What does it mean? I said, your child's in diversion. So when you are in diversion and now a private company owns that information because they ran a background check, they got it from a public source like the clerk's office or the police departments. So they got it from a public source at the time because they run background checks when you get an apartment on everyone who's there, even children. Now you go, the child goes on and finishes the diversion program. Once they finish that diversion program, they get it sealed and expunged. Okay, or let's say the case is dismissed or it's never filed and it's sealed and expunged. The clerk's office destroys the records, or they seal it, depending on what the order is, it's gone. But now that private company is not under the same legal authority. So they hold on to it forever. They own it. It's their personal property. So now that's why Google searches now turn up all this stuff about people that they thought was gone. And so those private companies, it changed the game in terms of what the criminal justice system could do if you had gone through a seal and expunge. So even now as a judge, when I sign certain things, people come in and I have a standing order or a standing form that I send back that lets people know that if you apply for anything where they run your background before this comes back, before the Florida Department of Law Enforcement officially gives you that seal and expunge, it becomes public information through a private company. So I send that to people when I sign those orders. I can't stop people from moving because I've lived in 2 houses my entire life. When I was 10 up until now. So it's unfortunate. Most people cannot afford to live in a house, but you don't think about those secondary consequences when you move. So please
let's go ahead and answer this question here before it disappears. It says, how do I instruct my child who is detained in juvenile detention? Should he or she simply plead no contest in order to get the case over with and continue with his or her life? So basically, if the child is detained, should they plead no? Can our Miss Speaks? Can you show the question again for us? There we go. All right, so we all can read it together. So, how do I instruct my child who is detained in juvenile detention? Should he or she simply plead no contest in order to get the case over with and continue with his or her life?
Yeah, here's what I will say, Ms. Pittman. I'm going to be very blunt with you. You want to get yourself a public defender.
Yes.
Our public defenders who do juvenile are a very select group. They're very good at what they do. Let me tell you what I think the benefit that white people have that we don't have in the system. Ed Phillips is a Pompano Beach commissioner. And he once told me, he said, Judge, when you up there, Black folks don't want you to do nothing for us that you would not do for white folks. We want you to be fair. All we ask is that you give Black folks wiggle room. Wiggle room means W-I-G-G-L-E. Like you wiggle out of something. He says white people have wiggle room. They somehow can wiggle out of trouble and we blacks don't get that same opportunity. So what I would tell you, Ms. Pittman, is don't plead the case out so quick. Run it through a public defender, because there might be some wiggle room for your child to wiggle out of this particular situation. That's why we have lawyers. And I have been in trouble before, and I hired a lawyer. And I'm sitting to you as a judge because I hired a lawyer. But I always go with the public defenders because they're very good at juvenile issues, but also they know the judge. There's an old saying, a good lawyer knows the law. A great lawyer knows the judge. They know exactly, right. They know exactly how I think, what I'm going to do, how I look at life, because they see me every single day in that courtroom. So I would say before you take that plea, get yourself a public defender, look at that case and make sure there's not some wiggle room.
Yes. Great. And let me just chime in before we change courses here. Both of you are a lot of people who are watching this. I want you to know that this is an amazing discussion that's happening right now. Not too often we can get not one judge but two judges to speak to us on a public format like this. And I remember one time I did a forum similar to this, but in high school. This was before Judge Evans became a judge. I invited, I handpicked some of my favorite judges. I'm not going to name them, to come out to Boyd Anderson High School and speak. One of them is speaking now, Judge Williams, and Judge Gillespie came, and Judge Robinson came.
Yeah.
And a few other came, and they were like, how do you manage to get these people here? I say, well, I had to credit someone who I worked with in the community, Dr. Ruth Lynch. And where I want to go at with this is, what kind of programs are you all involved in to prevent young people from getting locked up? Basically, getting a criminal record. So what are you all doing for your community right now? Judge Evans, go ahead. What are some things you're doing right now?
First, it's a question that the way you phrase it is one we have to be careful, because honestly, we're not advocates. I told you that from the beginning. We gave up that right when we took this job. We are members of different organizations that most people wouldn't assume. Like we're both in the NAACP. We're both members of the NAACP. Now, when I said that, when I left work, my dad used to tell, my late father, he taught at Dillard for over 30 years. And my mother taught at Dillard, Boyd Anderson, and Walker. And yes, she taught at Walker when I was there. So I got beat in my class, and then I got taken to her class. I got beat in her class too. But when I talked to my dad, when I said I was going to a meeting, I said I had to hang up with him. He said, "Don't say that out loud." And I said, "What do you mean, don't say that out loud?" And in his day, and it took me a while to get it, because he told me in his day that people had to whisper about things like that, and there were consequences for letting people know about things like that. As an advocate, before I was a judge, I worked with the Children's Services Council. I worked with, that's because I was the deputy chief of the juvenile unit, so I was with Judge Williams on a lot of those boards and a lot of those organizations that were part of going into schools and explaining about the changes in law, like the zero tolerance policy, explaining that they didn't have to contact law enforcement for every time that they had trouble with a child. And I didn't know that they had a button that they had to press on a computer before they could send a child to the computer. Did you contact law enforcement? And law enforcement said, well, if you contact us, we're going to respond as law enforcement. We're not social workers. So why would you call us if you don't need us? But procedurally, they were told that they had to do that. All it took was a change in procedure, because the law didn't change. The law had changed, and the law did not require them to make that phone call. But just explaining that to people opened a lot of people's eyes to what was going on and how Broward had the numbers and the level of arrest that it had. So I did quite a bit as an advocate, but as a judge, one of the biggest things that I do is I spoke to you earlier about the people who didn't come back, and I get to see one right now. I get to sit on share panel space right now with someone who does. So I make it a point to come back. And Ms. Hughes, who invited us both, knows that she called and we respond. We're here. She knows that if we can be, I almost could not be here today because I was almost called in to serve on your canvassing board. So I was going to be in the supervisor of elections office today, and that's why I was planning to spend my day. I've also had 10 deaths in my family this year, and I have an aunt in the hospital.
Sorry to hear that.
Well, and I appreciate it. But it's one of those things that it's part of life, and the entire family is struggling. So many people who were taught by my father or my mother, and everyone seems to know my dad, Ransom Lee. And if you know him, I don't have his same views on corporal punishment. Don't be afraid of me. But apparently he left a lasting impression on a lot of people. But it's one of those things where showing up to the community and showing people that we're real, that we exist.
Yes, yes.
And that we're not afraid to come to the community. We can't be everywhere all the time. We have jobs. We have to be on the bench. If you call us in the daytime during the weekday, you're going to find us on the bench. But this is our weekend. This is our free time. You called us when I locked my wife and my daughter out of the room, and so I could be here. So I'm not a husband or a father right now because I'm giving of my time. So and that's one of those important things that we can do because we're not just individuals anymore. We're public servants. So I'm going to turn it over to the man that who's been one of those beacons like Judge Gillespie and Judge Michael Robinson was taught by my father, but Judge Mary Robinson is the one who when I tried my first non-jury case in front of. And
this question here, real quick, it says, do you suggest we need more programs in our community to save our kids from jail? Yes. Well, and yes.
But Mr. Carter, let me be very candid with you, okay? I'm a judge, so I deal with facts, okay?
Yes.
So if you ask me, do we need more programs in the community to deal with our kids going to jail? We just got the report from 2010 until 2019. I read it off to the entire NAACP at Black Judges Night in February. For over the last 10 years, because of a combination of what the NAACP, Marcia Ellison, has done, along with Gordon Weeks, along with Senator Thurston's office, and myself, I played a role, we have reduced juvenile arrests in Broward County by 70%, 70. We've had a 70% reduction in arrests, and most of those are Black kids, okay? So to some extent, we are winning this war. A 70% reduction in Black kids being arrested in a 10-year period, we're winning this war. But at some point, Mr. Carter, we're going to have to stop talking about programs and equality and start talking about equity. And this conversation about money, white folks will keep us, good-hearted white people and Black people will keep us discussing equality till we drop dead. At some point, we need to discuss equity because money and equity will solve our problems in health disparity. It's going to solve our education opportunities disparities, our problems in the criminal justice system. So yes, we do need more programs, but understand that the NAACP has led this charge. We're winning this war. The question for us is let's transition at some point into the area of money, because I found out that folks will talk to you all day long about your rights, equality. Start talking about where the money going, everybody gets real quiet.
Yes, and that's important. I believe in I do believe that we need to have more conversations about funding in our Black community, especially generational wealth. That's one thing. I'm not married yet. I don't have kids yet, but I know for a fact when that time comes for me, one of the biggest things I'm going to be big on is generational wealth. Just like how we got we have the big house in South Carolina that's been in our family for ages. The house is still standing. They can't take that house away from us.
Right.
And that's how I want to be. So we are this has been great to be able to speak to you too. And I don't want to keep you all because I know everyone it's even though it's a Saturday, everyone is still sort of busy with things. So go ahead and just I'm gonna wrap this up. But give us some closing remarks. Give us some final remarks from the both of you. Judge Evans, go ahead.
Well, first, I want to thank you for moderating and for everyone for putting this together and putting us on, and Ms. Hughes for inviting us, because she knows that we will be here. But keep in mind that this is not about battles, and I'm hesitant to say some of the things that that are running through my head, but a lot of this is educating yourself, and I keep seeing it from the Historic River Bend Association. Mr. Dorsey was a friend of the family who's known me since I was a baby. This community's watched me grow up, so I appreciate this community for being there for me and allowing me to serve. But keeping in mind, we're public servants. So know who your public servants are.
Yes.
I know I voted. I'm not on the ballot. I voted. I'm what they call a super voter, so I get a lot of mail.
Me too. Oh goodness.
It's a good problem to have, because it means you're exercising that right. My great grandmother was one of the people, which was one of the first Black women to vote in the state of Alabama, and it was not an easy task for her. And it was one of those things that we celebrate in our family because it means so much. But it's not just about voting. It's about knowing who you vote for.
Yep, that's amen.
I've never in my life have met a sitting president. But I know I got to meet every judge as a teenage intern and then as a law school intern. In my early 20s, I got to walk around and meet all the judges in the courthouse. Judges are elected officials, so I'm meeting people who are on the ballot. Now, we're on the bottom of the ballot. That's the thing, is people don't get to know us because, sadly, I know people who vote and they vote for one race because that's the most important race to them, and then they leave. But they don't realize how much the people on the rest of that ballot will impact their daily lives. And you shining a light on this, it's an incredible thing, because people forget who's on the rest of that ballot. And if you just check off names, it's the same as not exercising your right to vote. You're giving that choice up to someone else. So know who's representing you. And the courthouse, you went to go see Judge Williams. I understand right now we're in a different time during the pandemic, but it's an open building. It's a public building. So when things are back to normal, whatever that is, when it's open as it was before, you'll have the ability to go in to different courtrooms. Right now, I had an observer in my courtroom, in my virtual courtroom yesterday, and I called his name out because he has his screen blocked off. But I just want to make sure it wasn't someone that was waiting to have their case called and no one was acknowledging the person. So I said, username, and I shouted out the name, and I said, do you have a case on the docket? Please acknowledge, otherwise you're going to wind up waiting. They weren't disruptive, so I didn't remove them from the room. My proceedings are a public record. So know who your elected officials are, so you can go to different Zoom rooms and see people in action, and get to know your elected officials.
It's important. It's important.
But everyone on that ballot. So thank you. I appreciate everyone, you and everyone who's put this together. And thank you for letting me sit next to a legend right now. So I appreciate it. I'm not going to say anything else about him because his ego is going to be out of control after this. But
look, I can say a lot about him, but I know how he gets, so I'm not gonna even. Go ahead, Judge Williams.
I just want to say, Judge Evans, you are exactly what I've always sought to reproduce me. Everyone tries to reproduce themselves. I don't have any children, so I can't call you my child, but just thank you for being you. Mr. Carter, I just want to say I've been able to bring a little bit of what I do in this courtroom out into the community. That's what this has meant to me, to bring my courtroom out into the community. But I just want to end by saying this. No one ever owes you their time and attention. No one ever owes you their time and attention. It is a gift. So for the gift that you and your listeners have given me over the past hour or so, their time and attention, I can only say thank you for that gift. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. Like he said, like Judge Evans said, it is very important that you do get out and vote. Sunday is the last day of early voting. The polls are still open. Know who represents you, and hold those leaders accountable. And I'm going to end with this quote. If I can help somebody as I pass along, if I can cheer somebody with a word or song, if I can show somebody he's traveling wrong, then my living shall not be in vain. It is very important that we all continue to support one another, uplift one another. We're living in an interesting time. COVID-19 has changed the trajectory of a lot of things, but do not forget to love on somebody, encourage somebody. Thank you all so much for watching this. Thank you to the Dorsey River Band, the Table Talk Media, and the Prince to King's Mentoring Program for allowing me to be the facilitator for these great discussions we've been having. So get out, vote, stay safe, wear your mask. Thank you guys so much for watching.
Thank you very much. For sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.